On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, I am flying solo without my partner in crime, Howie, but I did my best to make him proud when I interviewed Dr. G. Dr. G is challenging us as camp owners to think differently about our relationship with staff parents. That you heard it here. I didn't say camper parents, staff parents. Dr. G is, wanting camp owners to think differently about how we can use staff parents as allies to close that triangle of staff, their parents, and us. I hope that you will challenge yourself to think differently about this. Listen to the episode. She has lots of great ideas, tools, tips that I believe you will find great value in. So take a listen and enjoy. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Welcome, everyone. I am Kelly Shuna. I am the co-owner, and executive director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota. And I'm flying solo today. I'm sorry, Howie fans. He was called away on importante camp business. So it is just me and our guests today. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. First order of business today is I need to thank our first sponsor, which is Camp Brain. We want to give a big shout out to them for sponsoring our podcast. They have been in the camp software industry since 1994. They have 45 plus dedicated staff, many of which I've gotten to know in my transition to Camp Brain this month. Jen White from Manitou Camp says about Camp Brain, best customer service. Camp Brain makes you feel like you have a team with you to help get all the answers you need as quickly as possible. Very willing to adapt functions to work for different scenarios. If you are interested in checking them out, campbrain.com or 866-485-8885. And today we have the esteemed camp resource expert, all the things, Dr. G with us as a returning guest. We felt that this would be a great topic after myself and one of Howie's leadership team members attended the successful ACA Staffing Summit. And one of her topics, Miss Dr. G, was the buzz about partnering with staff parents, a little controversial here. And so we thought that this would be a great topic. We want to hear Dr. G's perspective, and we're hoping this might just change our attitudes a little bit as camp owners and our approaches to recruitment efforts, developing excellent staff behaviors, driving retention by engaging, setting boundaries, and being open to that partnership with parents of our staff. As many of our listeners know, Dr. G is a leading parenting and youth development expert, family physician, international speaker, author, and media expert. Her straightforward advice, which is always accompanied by good humor, helps wade through the stress, doubt, and guilt that all parents and educators feel at one time or another. She's a lifelong camper and has knowing admiration for counselors and administrators who play a key role in shaping the campers around them. Welcome back to the Camp Owners Podcast, Dr. G.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I'm excited too. It's kind of fun, just the two of us. I miss Howie dearly. But it really it feels like you and I are chatting. And for me, I feel very fortunate because this is great follow-up to your session. So why don't you give your quick little origin story into camp? We always ask every guest that, but if they didn't listen to the previous episode you were on, please talk to us a little bit about your, how you arrived to be so connected to the camp world.
So as I understand it, I was the first 2-year-old day camper in Connecticut who in the 3-year-old group, because my mom just could not take it. She could not have me home another minute. So, and she was such a fan of camp in general that she went to the JCC and said, you can take her. No, but she's really mature. It'll be fine. So at 2.5, I went into the 3-year-old day camp group, and I spent the next 14 summers as a day camper, an overnight camper, or both, some summers. And then I took a brief break to try the summer job thing. And then as soon as I went to college, I started being a day camp counselor and then an overnight camp counselor. I was a day camp unit head, an overnight camp unit head. I was in charge of the girls' half of camp at an overnight camp that I worked at for several years. And then I started sending my own kids to camp, first day camp, also overnight camp. Now, this past summer, 2 of my kids were staff and 2 of my kids were campers at overnight camps. And I have been lucky enough to be the medical director for an overnight camp. So I've seen camp from a lot of different directions.
Wow, that I'm so excited to hear about your different side of the coin, having you're the parent of camp staff. So I think that will come into a little bit in my next question. So I'll let you tell us about it, but tell us about the motivation for this idea of camp owners partnering with staff's parents versus just camper parents.
If it's okay, I want to start off by saying, I understand why this sounds like a horrible idea. I expect a lot of pushback about this idea, but I think the conversation about the role of staff parents is really important. It's not if the parents of your staff are aware that their kids work for you. For the most part, they are. It's not like their young adult kids aren't talking to them about working for you, even running some of their decisions by their parents. So parents have an impact on their kids' success as your staff members. The question is just, do you want to close the triangle and be in conversation with those parents yourself? Because it is a triangle for sure. And the answer isn't universally yes. I completely understand that. But I would like people to stop pretending that parents of staff have no role in their kids' employment with your camp. We know that they do. That being said, I would like you to prime the pump a little. I would like you to have your voice in that parent's ear as well, not only their frustrated, bored, overwhelmed, exhausted young adult.
I love the idea of the triangle, closing the triangle. That's a great little quote for this. And that is the truth. And for me as a camp owner, I think we feel, I'll speak for myself, but almost like you can't talk to their parents. So I feel like there's been this, they're 18, they're an adult, we can't talk to them. So besides the seeing them, in public, if we are at a day camp. So that's an interesting, difference in thinking.
So, I got this question a lot during my session. Well, what about the legality of it? And it turns out that the educational privacy laws that at camps we're often used to paying attention to, and the medical privacy laws, in most states, they don't apply in this situation. Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a lawyer. So for those of you who get that reference, that Star Trek reference, I don't know the laws in your state, the laws in the states that your staff come from. I understand that you may feel that you need, or you might actually legally need permission from your staff to talk to their parents. I want to tell you that I think that most of your staff would give you that permission. So if it's okay, Kelly, can we take the legal piece of it off the table for now and say, yes, you have to look into that. Yes, you may need your staff's permission. Okay. Mm-hmm. The question then is, should we? Ethically, morally, should we be talking to them? And 6 years ago, transparently, I was like, man, we got to treat young adults like adults. We've got to raise our expectations, not lower them. We should not be babying them. I'm very anti-fragility. I still feel those ways, but I watched camp after camp after camp lose staff this summer that they didn't have to lose. That if they had been able to form an alliance, right? I'm using my kids' gaming language, form an alliance with those parents, they'd have been more likely to keep some of those staff. And so I really want to think for just a minute to have you put yourself in the place, and some of you may be in the place of having kids who are that age, of having kids who are in that 17 to 25-year-old age range. You know that as parents of those kids, we're very worried about their mental health, and we're not wrong to be worried about their mental health. And we often see the summer as their only real chance for recovery, because the stresses that they deal with during the school year as older high schoolers or as college students or as graduate students or as young teachers, young gym teachers, right? Young people working in seasonal, by seasonal, I mean school year work. We know how hard that is. And we can't say, well, walk away from it, right? It's okay, just quit, because they need their education or they need their career. Unfortunately, much as we shouldn't, we then watch our kids go through those same stressors or that same level of mental distress during the summer. And we want to say, boy, this was supposed to be your chance to recover and get after it again in September. This was supposed to be a rest and recovery period. Maybe just quit and we'll go to the beach. And that is not what parents should say, 100%. But if we don't help them see why they shouldn't say that, how they're not doing their kids any favors, then they think they're helping their kids to be safe mentally. They think that they're rescuing and helping them to recover. So we have to make our argument. We can no longer just expect that parents know that perseverance and good work ethic and sticking to your commitments and doing your best is its own reward. Because the last few years have been so difficult and damaging that for a lot of parents, it feels like too big a risk.
Mm-hmm. Well, something that really stuck with me after listening to you at the staffing summit was how involved parents are today with their kids. So I went to college in the late 90s. I think I talked to my parents once a month. If I had a parking ticket or I needed something, it was not very frequent. Now, mind you, this was before cell phones were in our back pockets, but it's very different. And as you referenced, 6 years ago, we were thinking they need to be independent. And I was doing the same judgment of friends that worked at Target, and the parents of their staff would be calling them. But I think it's a product of where we are today. And we can either put our head in the sand, or as you're saying, how can we embrace it and use it almost to our advantage, like you said, to keep staff and have those staff parents support the good work that we're doing at camp.
And please don't misunderstand me. I am not suggesting that you take each staff parent onto your leadership team. I'm not suggesting that you give them free rein, that they be a part of your decision-making. I am asking that you think of them strategically like you think of your campers' parents. I understand that your campers' parents are your customers, so that is a different relationship. But if you can think of your staff parents as community allies, helping you stay fully staffed, helping you have fewer call-offs, helping you have a more motivated staff, a more invested and excited staff, out there recruiting for staff, because another big part of the conversation we're having this year is how do I find enough good applicants and keep them? So this is the keeping them part of the conversation. But if you form strong relationships, then those parents are going to say to their friends, hey, I hear that you're worried about your young adult child, but working at this camp has been great for my kid, and they communicate with the parents. You don't have to be worried that you won't know, or that they'll be damaged, or that they're going out into a black hole. So I am not suggesting giving parents free rein. I am suggesting in getting them invested in their child's success while staying working at your camp, not asking them to help you make decisions about what should happen with your staff members.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can specifically think of a couple in instances in the past couple of years that I feel like I will handle differently after really thinking about this. One regarding mental health, for those parents to know that I was aware of it, that I'm supporting your child while they're working for me. And, another one, even last year, a day camp counselor was frustrated with us that he couldn't take time off to go do his dentist in the middle of the day or things like that. And that his mom was upset about it. Well, even for me to say, hey, you know what, can I reach out to your mom quick, just so I can tell her a little bit more about the why, about why we want you here consistently. I feel like even just a small little thing like that could work in our favor, like you said, of not losing some of those staff and them returning, because that is a big part of their parents supporting the return to staff the next year and the next year versus pushing them to get an internship or some other type of job.
Or just getting a job where there feels like, it's more money hourly and it's less impact if it doesn't go well, because it's not as in your community, or your other kids' friends are there as campers, right? It's less enmeshed, and we want them more enmeshed. Actually, that turns out building those connections is really healthy and helpful for them, but can be a little intimidating if people don't feel supported. So practically speaking, here's what I'm saying. I am saying that when staff, not if, when staff struggle, because working at camp is hard, when staff struggle, unlike 15 years ago, they are primarily reaching out to their adults at home. They may also be telling their peers, their peers at camp and their peers not at camp, but they're primarily, this is a change in the last 7 or 8 years. By the way, this isn't terrible for society. This is how things were, as you saw when I presented all that data, Kelly, this is how things were reliably until just about 20 years ago. So being connected multi-generationally for mentorship and support in our families isn't bad for society, but it can be frustrating for camp directors for sure. Especially, and I think we got to point this out, staff who used to be campers. So you may be worried that their parents already feel entitled to tell you how to raise them, how to employ them. But since we know that when it's hard, they are likely reaching out to people at home, whether they're in a day camp situation and they're going home and talking about it, or in their hour off or their day off, it's their parent that they're calling. This is your opportunity to front load that parent so that instead of saying, oh, that sounds too hard and I'm worried about you too, why don't you just come home? Or why don't you just quit? Instead, they say, oh, that sounds hard. Kelly said this would be hard. And one of the suggestions that she had was to make sure that you'd reached out to your supervisor and let them know that you were struggling, or that you made sure that you led your campers in a free time activity that's really fun for you also and really lifts your spirits. So have you found a way to do that today? Or have you had an opportunity to reach out to your supervisor? Those are 2 strategies that most camp owners would be fine with, and that we want the parent to remind them of.
I love that. I'm taking notes, Dr. G. I love those conversation starters that you have passed on to those parents for those conversations. And that's huge, to give them some words to use. So are you saying to camp owners to not be afraid to reach out to their staff's parents as needed on a case-by-case basis? Or are you encouraging us to be proactive and to do it right away?
Yeah. I am not just saying when you have a staff who's struggling, consider the parent as a possible resource. I am suggesting that you offer, and you may decide that you want this to be opt-in by your staff for their adults. That's okay. As opposed to opt-out, right? Somebody saying, no, thank you, I don't want that. But saying, yes, please contact my adult. But I am suggesting that you offer a staff parent orientation. Not a full, not training, not even as in-depth as you go for camper parents, but a little bit of context setting. And I have these, if people want them, you can reach out to me for a package, but you could, if you have the time or the bandwidth or a person on your staff, create just a few materials. When your staff struggles, here are things to remind them. Be really clear. Give them a checklist. Give them, a bookmark or a magnet for the fridge. Probably digitally, not really, because even these parents are millennial parents now, most of them. So when you're looking at the struggles that you've had, I want you to both offer them resources and this is another place I can help, I want you to set boundaries. I want you to say, please do call us if I have a resource that I offer to day camps for their campers' parents that is, and this is a little medical, but it's based on the asthma action plan. Kelly, did you ever have a kid at camp with an asthma action plan? Green, yellow, red? Where
I don't think I have. I've had lots of allergy plans, but I don't think I've heard it specifically of the asthma one. Tell me more.
So kids who have bad asthma, they get this asthma action plan that says you're in the green and you're good to go to school or camp or whatever in this situation. You're in the yellow with these parameters, do this thing, check this, and you're in the red, call your doctor right now in this situation. So I created a call camp action plan for day camps to offer to their parents of campers that say things like, basically, if you're worried about the weather, that's green. You don't have to tell us. We are watching the weather. I promise, right? That is, you do not need 17 calls to camp to tell you that there might be a lightning storm on your field today. You knew that yesterday. Then the yellow. If you notice that your kid had been really excited to come to camp and now for several mornings has been really, really hesitant, does not want to get on that bus, and it's been a long conversation, watch it for a few days. But if it persists, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to know about that. And as a day camp owner, you can tell me if you agree with that or not, right? And of course, every camp that I use this with, they can adjust it to their parameters. But then red, if you had a death in your family last night, even if you are sending your camper to camp, please call us and give us a heads up. right? This happens a lot to day camp families. If you're taking your dog to the vet and might have to put them down today, please let us know today that that's going on for this camper. So that's an action plan that I've helped camps create for their camper parents. I want to give you an action plan also for your staff parents, because there are a few red situations you would like us to share with you as parents. You as a camp would like me to share with you a couple of bad situations that my staff person might be going through, even though they dragged themselves in that day. So there are a few red situations. There are a bunch of yellow situations where it's not an emergency, but after a few days, if you have these concerns or these things are going on, please reach out, let us know, give us that heads up. And then a whole bunch of things. Your kid needs a day off and they haven't gotten it yet, or they're not going to get it, they haven't asked. Your kid is having conflict with another counselor, where please don't call us, but please do encourage them to talk to that person, encourage them to go to their supervisor, encourage them to get on WhatsApp, and whatever your methods are. So set boundaries. I want you to tell parents when they shouldn't reach out, but I want you to consider that there are a few situations in which you do want them to reach out.
I love that. Well, and on both sides, it is the worst for the camper side to hear at the end of camp in an eval or later about the tough time their camper had. It's just the worst. And then also on the staff side at the end of camp to hear that they were struggling, or it's just, you want to be able to address it. And I love so much the don't call us for the green, but here's some tools, because I don't know, it just gives me all those good feels about camp, that not only are we impacting those campers and staff, but we're also impacting their parents. And when we give them those words to use and those tools, it's just so much, we have a higher likelihood that they will use them and they will know what to do.
Excellent staff, and that they'll be excellent returning staff the next year. We're experiencing this thing that everybody who's an educator is just starting to read about in journals and on podcasts, called developmental divergence from the pandemic. This is not straight up developmental delay like we were worried about when everybody was totally locked down. It's divergence. People are developing certain things faster, like their relationships with extended family. We're seeing middle schoolers value their extended family relationships in ways they had not done 10 years ago. That's very cool. They are starting to value, middle schoolers are starting to value their extended family relationships and their adult mentor relationships in ways that usually people didn't until they were 18 or 19 or 20 years old. So cool. But we are also seeing 6th and 7th and 8th graders who are behaving in interpersonal conflict like they are in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade. And I bet that when you look back at last summer at camp, people are going, oh yeah, I did see that with some kids. Well, also high school and college age people are having some developmental divergence as well. We're only starting to measure and understand what that is. So saying should about what they ought to be able to do, you're not wrong, and it still may not be helpful to think about should right now. Instead, let's think about, okay, if they're not where we want them to be, how do we help them get where we want them to be?
Teachable moments through camp. So you've listed a couple of things that camp owners can do. So just for me to recap, to make sure if there's any other suggestions that you have. So one is to have a parent orientation for the staff. So via Zoom before camp happens. Added plus, super plus would be to have some tools, like an action plan for them. Maybe a bookmark, maybe something tangible that they can see at home. Maybe it's a little, like you said, magnet even. I mean, everyone has a fridge still, right? So maybe it's a magnet with your camp logo on it that reminds them. Any other tools, tips that you
I don't know
suggest?
that a Zoom orientation is right for every camp.
Okay.
If I were doing it, if I were a camp owner at this point, I think I might create a video resource that people could just access one-on-one.
Okay.
I honestly don't want you to create a community of staff parents to all start asking you questions in one setting and being like, well, Kelly, what are you gonna do about this? And my kids had this experience and they didn't like that. And how are you gonna, this does not need a town hall feeling to it, but a literally a selfie video of someone in leadership, whoever's going to be, you think, the most likely contact person. It might be the director, it might be the owner, it might be someone else, to do a selfie video while walking around camp. I wanted to show you where, because you're probably not going to be here, where your kid does it. We'll do this and this as a staff person, so you can picture it when they're telling you great stories. And then just sit down someplace at camp, look in the camera and say, and when they're telling you about things that are hard, because you probably know that, helping young kids through their summer can be hard. And when your kids appreciate you more, that'll be great. But when it's hard, here's what I want you to know. We're paying attention. We are experts not only in younger kid development, but in young adult development as well. We want your kid to have a really successful work experience this summer. We want them to learn. And this is a key point. If you want to get parents on board with you, you need to identify a goal that you share. I'm a family doctor, and I spend a great deal of my time talking adults into behavior change, either behavior change to change something in their own lives or something in their kids' lives. But I spend a lot of time talking to adults and trying to get them to do something differently. And what all the research shows is that the only thing that has a chance of getting adults to do something differently is helping them see that what you're suggesting will get them to a goal that they already had. We're doing that with this podcast. We are saying the goal that we know we share is that you want your staff to stay through the summer with an excellent commitment and be excited to come back next year. We want that too. So the behavior change that I am suggesting is one I want you to consider, because it will get you to a goal you already have. Go to parents and say, we know that we share the goal of wanting your kids to have the skills they need to be excellent employees at whatever job they get. Here's how to use this summer to help them build those skills: punctuality, communication, respect, professionalism, self-advocacy, commitment, motivation, compassion, work with children, whatever it is. We're going to help you help your kids be excellent employees, have a strong work experience. Don't use words like, we want to help you help your kids have fun, or other things that you would say to camper parents. That's not your purpose in these kids' lives.
I am so glad you clarified doing it via Zoom, because that's what I had in my mind. So I'm glad that you clarified
It
that.
might be
So
right for some people.
Thank you for saving me from that experience.
Well, right. It might be right for some people, but you can see how it could go horribly wrong.
Yep. Yep. For sure. For sure. No, I really like that you clarified that. And the video, being at camp, giving them some of those tools and words to use. And then you could even accompany a letter home or something like that, that reiterated the things like the shared goals. Cause that is true. I feel like camp owners do, you take on a little bit of that parenting feeling for these staff members, and you want them to be successful in their future jobs, in their careers, as people, as humans. So I think that speaks to a feeling we already have.
Right.
It's just,
yeah, this is authentic.
yes.
None of this is put on. It's just thinking about it a little bit differently. In the past, you've kept parents out of it for the same reason, because you wanted these young adults to grow up to be successful employees and not running to mom and dad. But they are talking to mom and dad. And for those of you who have kids this age, often your kids are talking to you, and you value it. You see how it helps them. You want that relationship with them. That's not damaging. Many adults that I know who are in their 40s and 50s, who are lucky enough to have their parent around, also go to their parent for perspective and mentorship and advice. So that in and of itself isn't damaging, but it can blow back on you and mess up your whole day or your whole week or your whole relationship with an employee. So if you build a fence around how it can be helpful and say, in here, yes, outside this fence, no, I'm sorry, that's not appropriate, or we're not going to engage about those things, you'll be more likely to be successful than if you just put no fence at all and see where the weeds pop up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as parents, man, when we can get some insight into our kids when they're away from us, or when they're in one of those first jobs, or even if it's in school, you just feel such pride. And I know it always can't work for overnight camps to see those parents, but as a day camp, if I run into my staff parents, I just feel like I'm bursting with things I want to tell them that I see in their kids, because it's just, feels just so excited to share that. And we've done a staff parent night purposely for them to come and see their kids in their summer home and see them in action and get a picture into what they're talking about. But I think anything where we can give them some insight into that experience for their child and the ways that they are growing and flourishing and being stretched is just also feels really, really great as a parent.
It does. There's no question. My oldest son has been an overnight camp counselor, but on each summer on the side of the pandemic when their camp was closed. So in 2019 and 2021, and his 2019 year was rough. And then my next son had his first year as a camp counselor this summer, and it was far more difficult. And I could not be more pro camp in my kids' lives. I absolutely could not be. I could wish that I had a little bit of this front loading though from the camp, because even as I think arguably one of the most supportive camp parents and camp staff parents it's possible to be, listening to my 16-year-old calling me and saying, I'm not going to quit, but I really want to, or I know I don't want to quit, but I'm really considering it. I said all the things that camp director would want me to say. Yes, this is hard, tons of empathy. What are you doing to make it better? Have you talked to and I called camp 0 times. I'm really proud of that, because for the first time ever, that was a struggle. I had to work not to call because he was having such a difficult time. And if I am struggling not to take too heavy-handed a role, and I am really at one end of the bell curve in terms of knowing exactly why camp is awesome for my young adults and why I'm so glad they're working there as staff and how they will be okay, then I'm willing to bet that most parents are struggling.
Yes, I would say yes. If you felt that way, knowing what you know about camp, knowing what you know about the people who run camps and campers, yes, I would absolutely say yes to that. So any other final thoughts that you want to share with camp owners listening to this, whether they're, oh, okay, thank you for getting me to think a little differently about this. I want to hop on that. Or those that are like, oh my gosh, no way, Dr. G, this is too much. Any other final thoughts or things you want to share before we wrap up the episode?
Absolutely. Here's my suggestion, because in either of those answers, you could be right. So I'm not arguing that this is always the right way to handle staff parents. I just want you to go read your mission statement. Read your mission statement and then pass this question of, should I or should I not be in conversation with staff parents in light of your mission statement? And I think if you're 100% sure, you don't need to bother with that. But if you're at all on the fence, I think the answer is probably there.
Well, one of the enlightened moments that I think many camp owners had, that I've had, is you come into camp thinking, the campers, I want to impact campers. I want to, and for me, it feels like a 50-50, that the impact on staff is just as equal for me as with campers. And especially in light of this current moment of, it's been all about the campers, staff work long hours. It'll be rewarding. I think we have to do some due diligence to look at the staff and what do they need. And this to me feels like a way that we can help to meet that need and get support from their parents to close that triangle. So I think it speaks to this moment of we're having to pay more attention to staff. And this is one of the ways that we can support them more than we ever have before.
They want to help us change kids' lives and save kids' lives. They can do that, I think, if we do this.
Mm-hmm. I like that. All right, before we move on to the end of our podcast, we have one more sponsor to thank, Dr. G, Camptivities. So Camptivities, if you are not familiar with them, they are a scheduling resource for camp. They can help you with making rainy day schedules, customized settings, tables, manual adjustments, really taking away that extra work on your leadership team, especially if you're going to have other focuses this summer, staff parents, anything to do with staff. So I would highly recommend checking out Camptivities. They can save you time. And it's like, what is your money worth? How is your time best spent as camp owners and leaders? And Camptivities may be able to take some of that off your plate to put your attention and time and resources to other things. So if you are interested and going and checking out Camptivities, we highly recommend Ryan Rosen and looking at camptivities.com. Dr. G, we always end each show with something that's inspiring us. So it can be a book, article, podcast, documentary, leadership quote, anything that's just helping us be better camp professionals. So I will role model this for you, and I will share something that's really related to this topic. Is I read an article on CNBC. It's from 2017, but it's from the PepsiCo CEO's Indra Nooyi. She writes letters to her employees' parents. So this was 4 years ago. Yes. And I read this a couple of years ago and thought,
I'm
what a
looking
great
this up
idea
right now.
Isn't that a great idea? And I wanted to pull the trigger, but end of summer, I was thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to write 50 letters? And it's week 8. But what I did do this year from reading this is I wrote a letter to all my 4-year staff parents, just thanking them for their kids and what they've done for camp and the growth that I've seen in them, and just the grateful feelings that I have for them. And that was so fun for me. And I felt like that 4-year mark was they've really given a lot of time to camp. So that article really inspired me to do that. And I think it's perfect for this topic. So I'm going to link the website article for our readers in our show notes. So do you have something that you would like to share?
Absolutely. The podcast that I'm listening to right now that I find it's on a really general topic. It's by Glennon Doyle and her wife, Abby Wambach, and Glennon's sister, Amanda, and I cannot remember her last name. I apologize. But the podcast is called We Can Do Hard Things. And it's really about interpersonal relationships. And it is one of those experiences where, like reading a good book, where after I've listened to a bit, I'll go out into the world and have an interaction with someone and think, oh, I can take this thing that I learned. As a matter of fact, one of the most recent things, and I know that this will have aired just probably a little after the holidays, but they were talking about getting together with family over the holidays. And they said, the best predictor of future family behavior is past family behavior. Be unsurprised.
I love that podcast. I just listened to her podcast with Brene Brown about her Atlas of the Heart.
Fantastic.
There was so many fantastic things in there for camp
leadership,
leaders.
for sure.
Oh, for sure. So good. So good. All right. I will link that podcast. I agree with you. I 100% would promote listening to that. All right. So if any camp leaders listening to this, I'm sure they will, want to reach out to you, can you share for me the best way to reach you, but also you talked about some of those action plans. If camps are interested in utilizing you as a resource to develop their own, or any resources that you have, tell us the best way to reach you to get those.
So I'm Gen X, so email is always the best way to reach me, but I'm adaptable. So I'm also on social media. So you can find me on Facebook or on Instagram, but the easiest thing, and if it's okay, we'll put my email in the show notes. It's drg@askdrg.com. You have to spell out askdrg.com.
Okay, I'm typing that in there right now. If anyone would like to get a hold of me, my email is kelly@hiddenpinesranch.com. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes, some of the resources that we've mentioned, at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find our cliff notes, you can find emails, anything that you'd like from the show, as well as links for our sponsors. We hope you enjoyed this. Dr. G, thank you so much for taking time from your busy day and the many hats that you wear to talk to camp owners about this topic. I think it'll be very beneficial, and I've learned a lot the second time talking about it. So thank you again. We appreciate your time, and we hope everyone enjoys it.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you very much.